It's Dan Nelson. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of dismissing your own suffering. I see this happen a lot. In fact, one of my first therapy sessions, I told the therapist how, I went through all these things, right? My mom was physically, emotionally, neglectful, abusive, the whole kit and caboodle, right? And but in the process of talking to my therapist, I also had a friend growing up in high school whose mom was, she was addicted to crack, and she struggled for many years with that addiction until it finally killed her. At one point in time, my friend was sold by his mom for about $20. Like, himself was sold to her drug dealer for $20 so she could get another hit. I thought that was pretty horrible, right? That stuck out to me, and my friend was a good guy. I felt really terrible for him, and because his story was so terrible, it kind of made me start to dismiss my own suffering, because I assumed, oh, well, he had it so much worse than me. My suffering couldn't possibly, hold a candle to that, right? Turns out my therapist thought this was unhelpful. By dismissing your own suffering, you're kind of accidentally playing the part of your bully, right? You've internalized some of what the abuser, has done to you. So it took me many years to kind of recontextualize these things and just realize that just because my suffering was different than another person's suffering, it doesn't mean that my suffering doesn't mean anything. We all have these different horrible things that have done to us, traumatic things that have changed us and shaped us in many ways, like in a negative way. But what we can do is if we're honest with ourselves about what happened, we can start to take apart that trauma, and we can start to move forward, right? The worst, I guess, the people that I feel the sorriest for that I've met in my life are those that convince themselves that they've been unaffected by the trauma while their life is falling apart around them, and usually these people have beautiful gifts that they could share with the world, but because of what happened, because of the trauma they suffered, they're kind of stuck in this loop. And they're unable to get out of it and be the person that they could be, to share the gifts that they were born with, or the gifts that they've acquired, with the rest of the world, in fact, that's where the term arrested development comes from. Sometimes the trauma is so great that it freezes you in place. If you got abused when you were 10 years old, you'll stay 10 years old for the rest of your life until you deal with that trauma. Maybe that's a vast oversimplification of what's going on there, but what I'm trying to do is just help you realize that because your suffering might have not have been as worse as somebody else's, it doesn't mean that it's not important. In fact, to look within is actually a really, really tough thing to do. But I promise the results that you get when you work on this and you invest in yourself, when you finally detangle these roadblocks that have been created for you, all of a sudden you can get back to going on your journey, right? I hate to use New Age speak, but I think that's a really good image for what we're trying to do, right? It's a good metaphor for the idea of progress and trying to reclaim our lives, and move on so that we can continue doing our amazing things, and breaking that cycle. More importantly, breaking the cycle, because especially if you're someone like me, I've always wanted to be a dad. I've always wanted to, help other people, but my trauma was hampering me from doing that, and worst case scenario, I was going to, if I didn't examine my life, one of the worst things imaginable to me is that I could repeat that trauma onto my own children. And simply put, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to allow that to happen. And I think that you can also not allow it to happen. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of self-reflection. It's probably going to be really tough. I know it was for me. But at the end of the day, I can promise you that it's going to be worth it. And when you look back on it after 5 or 10 years, it might be some really tough work that you have to do. You might get lucky. Maybe you can make a lot of progress in a few months. You'd be super, super surprised at what you're capable of if you apply yourself just a little bit. So So essentially, to recap, to sum up, is the idea that you shouldn't dismiss your own suffering. You know, what happened to you was something that affected you for the rest of your life. And if you're able to kind of examine it and break it down, you know, hopefully you can kind of chew through it, you know, power through one way or the other, grow and rise above this personal challenge, and you can get back to living your life instead of surviving. All right. Well, hope you have a good day. Thanks for listening, and hope to see you at the next one.